Alright, so in this video we're going to learn about ratios and proportions, and hopefully it's a review from middle school. But a ratio is a comparison of two quantities, okay? So we're going to be comparing two things. The ratio of A to B can be written as three different ways. So we can write it as a fraction, A over B. We can write it with the word 2 in between, A to B. Or we can write it with this little colon, which represents 2. So you'd also read that as A to B. Extended ratios are just ratios that compare three or more things. So with geometry, sides of a triangle, angles of a triangle, okay? And that's just written like this, A to B to C. So for example, 9 to 4 to 2 could be the ratios of a triangle, angles, or something like that, okay? So write each ratio in simplest form. So obviously on 1 and 2, I just need to figure out a number that goes into the numerator and the denominator and divide by that number. So I know 3 goes into both of those, which would give me 13 over 11, which is simplest form. Okay, again, you could type that fraction in the calculator and it would simplify it for you. Same thing over here, if you type this into the calculator and hit math, enter, enter, you would get 3 over 16. Okay, so when we deal with ratios, we want them to be in the simplest form. All right, number 3 and 4, they want us to compare 6 days to 2 weeks. So the major thing is I'm not in the same units. Okay, I can't compare days and weeks. So I can't say 6 to 2. All right. What I need to do is basically convert these weeks into representing days. Okay, so we all know that 2 weeks means 14 days. So this has become 6 days to 14 days. Okay, so when I put that in a fraction, 6 over 14, and divide each one by 2, I would get 3 over 7. Okay, so that's the simplest ratio to compare those. Same thing on 4. Inches and feet are not the same units, and we typically convert to the first unit they gave us. So basically, I need to convert 3 feet back to inches. Okay, so we use little railroad tracks. I know there is 1 foot, or 1 foot has 12 inches. Okay, so the reason foot is on the bottom is because I know feet divided by feet will cancel out, leaving my answer in inches. So I just need to multiply 3 times 2 to get 36 inches. Okay, so now I've got 24 inches compared to 36 inches, and since I'm in the same unit, I can divide those and reduce it to get 2 thirds. Okay, so that is how you put a ratio into the simplest forms. So let me know if you have any questions on that. Otherwise, a blank is an equation that shows 2 equivalent fractions. That would be proportion. Okay, and you remember proportions from in middle school. Ooh, okay, so one method of comparing proportions is to look at both the fractions and simplify them and see if you get the same thing. So that means something is proportional. Same thing, if you don't like fractions, turn them into decimals, and if you get the same thing, then they are proportional. Last thing you could do is cross multiply. So if you multiply across, and you get the same thing, that also verifies that something is a proportion. Okay, so why don't you try 5 and 6, any of the ways you want, to determine if they are a proportion. So press pause and try that now. Number 1, if you simplify the fractions, you got 1 over 15 equals 1 over 15. So yes, that is a proportion. Same thing if you cross multiplied, you should have got 180 equals 180. And same thing for the decimal. On 6, I cross multiplied and got 225 and 210. So I put they were not equal. So that's an equal to sign with a slash through it. So number 6 was not a proportion. All right. So speaking of cross multiply, let's remember how to cross multiply. So I'm going to do 1 and 4 with you guys to refresh your memory, and then you're going to try 2, 3, and 5. So let's start off with the simple one and cross multiply. So I'm going to multiply 9 times 84 and get 756. And then once I cross multiply 28 times x, I'd get 28x. Last step is to divide by 28. So x is going to equal 27. Okay? So it's a very simple cross multiplying problem. They get obviously a little bit harder down here. So when I multiply 5 times 152, you should get 760. Okay? Now when you multiply two numbers, you might want to put them in parentheses and do the distributive property. Okay? Again, if you can do this, skip this step in your head, you're more than welcome to. So if you can know to multiply 8 times k and then 8 times 17, go for it. Okay? So then you'll have a two-step problem. We're going to subtract 136 on both sides to get 624 equals 8k, divide by 8. So we should get k equals 78. Okay? So again, if you've got two numbers in the numerator or denominator, so on 3 and 4, you're going to have to do the distributive property and make sure you multiply the number to everything. So why don't you try 2 and 3 and 5 on your own and press pause and we'll go over them. So for number 2, when you cross multiply, you could have got 0.29, or you could have left it as a fraction, 7 over 24. On 3, cross multiply and then distribute, and you should have got b equals 20. And then on number 5, you actually had a variables on both sides problem because you had two terms in both of the fractions. So I subtracted 7x. Again, you could have subtracted 5x and done this a little differently, but you should have ended up getting x equals 2. All right. So again, you could always check your answer to make sure you're right. So for example, if I plug 2 into here and here, I can double check to see if I'm right. So I'd have 2 plus 5 over 7, and I want to see if that equals 2 plus 3 over 5. So again, I would get 7 over 7, and then 5 over 5. So 1 would equal 1, so I know I'm right. All right, so you can always check your work to make sure you are right on a quiz or a test. All right? All right, so moving on to word problems, our favorite. So we've got some word problems with proportions and word problems with ratios. Okay? So I'm going to do this first one with you guys, and then I'm going to leave you to number 2 on your own. So first off, you're going to read the problem. In an engine, the vole of a cylinder changes as the piston moves up and down. The compression ratio is the expanded volume of the cylinder compared to the compressed volume of a cylinder. Okay. So one car with a V6 engine has a compressed ratio of 9.1 to 1. If the compressed cylinder is 25 cubic inches, find expanded. Okay, so we're talking about two kinds of ratios. So here's our keyword. Ratio is expanded to the compressed. Okay, so if you look for those to the and ratio, it's going to help you out. So basically, we've got the expanded volume over the compressed volume. Okay, so that means in this ratio, 9.1 over 1 is our proportion. Okay, so you're going to have to look in the word problem and see what goes first over what goes in the denominator. So and then it gave us the compressed cylinder. Okay, so it gave me that this is 25 inches cubed. And I'm trying to find the expanded volume. So I'm looking for x. Okay? So once you set up a proportion, all you have to do is cross multiply now. All right? So we can kind of ignore our inches for now, but our final answer would be in inches cubed. So once you multiply 25 times 9.1, you should get 227.5 equals 1x. So hey, we're done. So 227.5 inches cubed is our volume for our expanded. Okay? So a little tricky, but just make sure you kind of write in words what's happening over here. So why don't you try number 2, and then we'll talk about number 3. Number 2 is talking about a gear ratio. Is the number of teeth on the driving gear to the number of teeth on the driven gear. So again, my keyword there was ratio and to the. So my driving gear was on top over my driven gear on bottom. Okay, so then they gave me 5 to 2, and then they told me the driving gear. So I know driving goes on top, so I put 35 on top, and then it wants to know the driven, how many teeth does the driven gear have. So again, once you cross multiply, you should get 14. So if we want to try a nice sentence, it could be the driven gear has 14 teeth. Okay. All right. On number 3, you have a twin jet airplane, has a length of 78 meters and a wingspan of 90 meters. Okay. So that's the big airplane. Then we have a toy model that is made in proportion to the real airplane. Okay. And the wingspan of the toy is 36 centimeters. And I want to find the length of the toy. Okay. So they didn't give me a ratio here. They just told me that it was proportional. So basically, if this is my large airplane, it had 78 meters in length, and then it had 90 meters for the wing. Okay, so I'm going to put length on top, then wing on bottom. And then it said the toy model, let's see, the wingspan was 36. So I need to put 36 on the bottom because that is my wingspan. And I'm looking for the length. Okay, so writing out that word lengthen wingspan is going to help you out. So I've got a proportion. Now the only thing is I'm not in the same units. So I've got meters and I have centimeters. Okay, so since I am looking for the toy, let's change everything to meters. Okay, so let me do 36. Okay, so how many centimeters are in a meter? Y'all know? Remember, a centipede has 100 legs? So you've got 100 centimeters in 1 meter. Okay, so when I cancel out, 36 divided by 100 is 0.36 meters. So I'm going to change this down here to 0.36 meters. Okay. Now, we could have changed these to centimeters. It's pretty much just up to you. I wanted to do the less work and only change 1 unit. Okay. So when I cross multiply, you would have 90x equals 28.08 divided by 90. So x equals 0.312. Now again, that's in meters. Okay, so that toy has a length of that long. Now if you wanted to change it to centimeters, you're more than welcome to, and move it twice. So that's the same as 31.2 centimeters is how long the toy. Okay. So again, it's up to you. If you wanted to change the whole problems up to centimeters, you could. But we do want our final answer in centimeters because the toy is in centimeters, okay? So a little bit of changing through the units makes it kind of difficult, okay? So those are proportional problems. I'm actually going to make another video to find ratio problems. So let me know if you have questions on proportions. Otherwise, go ahead and watch that second video on ratios. All right, so now we're going to get into the ratio parts that are going to give us more geometry problems. But first off, we're going to start with country and hip-hop CDs, okay? So ratios of country CDs to hip-hop CDs in a music collection is 2 to 3. So that means for every 2 country CDs, you have 3 hip-hop CDs because you like hip-hop more. If the music collection has 45 albums or songs, CD songs, how many are hip hop and how many are country. So basically, X means the number of CDs that I have, okay? So when I have a ratio of 2 to 3, that means 2x plus 3x is going to equal my total, which is 45, okay? And this represents country, and this represents hip hop. Okay, so that's pretty much how you set up an equation based off of a ratio. So then you would just combine like terms and get 5x equals 45, divide by 5, and you would get x is a 9, okay? But we're not done. So it wants to know how many hip hop CDs, how many country CDs. So if I plug back in 9, I would have 18 country CDs. And then if I plug back 9 into 3, 9 times 3 is 27. So I'd have 27 hip hop. Okay? So now you could double check your answer and do 18 over 27 and reduce that fraction and divide by 9, and you should get 2/3, which matched our ratio up there. Okay? All right, I'm going to do number 2, and then I'm going to leave you free to do number 3 and 4 on your own. So we're going to get into geometry now. So the lengths of the side of a triangle are in the extended ratio 3 to 5 to 6. So I've got some triangle, and I've got one side that is 3, one side that is 5, one side that is 6. Okay? But the perimeter of my triangle is going to be 98. So I can see that if I add 6 plus 5 plus 3, I'm not going to get 98. So I need to make this shape larger by some amount that I don't know. So let's call it x. Okay? And then I know the perimeter is 98. So I'm going to set up an equation. 3x plus 6x plus 5x equals 98. So all you have to do is combine like terms and get 14x equals 98. Divide by 14, so x is 7. So I basically made that shape larger by 7, and then it would get a perimeter of 98. Okay, but my question says, what is the length of the longest and the shortest side? So my biggest number is a 6, so that's going to be my biggest side. So basically 6 times 7 is 42. So my longest is going to be 42 inches, because my units were inches. And then my smallest side deals with that 3. So 3 times 7 would be 21. So my smallest is going to be 21 inches. Okay. Again, you could plug it back into the medium side and then add them all up to make sure you're 100% right. Okay. But that is how you use ratios to solve problems with relating to geometry. Okay. So why don't you try number 3 and number 4 on your own, and then we will go over them. So press pause. For number 3, I drew a triangle, and then notice they were talking about angles in this one and not sides. So you had to label the 3, 4x, and 2x in the middle. Okay. Then you had to use your knowledge of a triangle equaling 180 to set up your equation. Okay. So a little bit different from sides. Once you got x was 20, it wanted the largest angle, so you had to plug it into the largest number to get 80 degrees, okay? So questions on 3, let me know. On number 4, you had to know what supplementary meant, and that's 2 angles that equal 180. So again, I gave my smaller angle the 5x, my larger angle the 7x. So I set an equation equal to 180 and got x equals 15. And then the problem wanted the largest angle, so I plugged it back into 7x to get 105 degrees, okay? So that's how you can use them with angles and sides. But let's talk about shapes now. So number 5, it says the perimeter of a rectangle is 420 centimeters. So let me go ahead and draw a rectangle. The ratio of the width to the length. So here's the width, here's the length. So I'm going to go width to length is 3 to 4. So I should label this side 3x and this side 4x. Okay. Now what is the width? Can't see the question. what's the width of the rectangle? Okay, so I need to use my knowledge of opposite sides are equal to give that a 3x. This is a 4x. Perimeter at the outside. So I'd have 4x plus 4x plus 3x plus 3x equals 420. Again, you could just know in your head 8 plus 6 is 14. There. Divide that by 420, and you should get x equals 30. Okay, not done because it wants to know the width, so I do need to plug it back up in here. So 3 times 30 is 90. So 90, and now my units are centimeters. So my width is 90 centimeters. Okay? All right. One more problem and then we are done. Okay. Why don't you actually try this one on your own? It's a little bit trickier, but why don't you get a head start on me and try it, okay? Did the problem 2 different ways, and I'm going to talk about the green way first, but ultimately your answer was 117, okay? So it gave me a ratio of 9 to 4, and I know it was length to width this time, okay? So I got a 4x and 9x over here. It told me the width was 52. So if I know this is 52, and I know the equation is 4x, you can actually set those two equal because they're talking about the same thing. So you could solve for x and get 13 and then plug it back in, and 9 times 13 is 117. Okay, 2 different ways to do that to ultimately find the length. If you wanted to use a proportion, you could have said 9 over 4, and then they actually gave you the width. So if I went length over width, I plugged in width on the bottom, and I'm looking for the length. So you could have cross multiplied and got 117 that way. So 2 different ways of kind of looking at that problem, all right? So that is how you solve ratios and proportions with word problems. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, you are free to practice.